The wind howled like it was trying to tell me something, rattling the windows of the old farmhouse. I was 16, too old for ghost stories. But when Grandpa Amos called me to the hearth that stormy night, his eyes held a weight I'd never seen. "Caleb," he said, voice low, "there's things about Marrowfield you need to know. Things I've kept quiet too long." He stirred the fire, and the shadows danced across his weathered face. "This land ain't just dirt and crops. It's got a hunger, and it's been fed." The fire in the hearth popped and hissed, throwing light across the living room of Marrowfield Farm. Caleb sat across from his grandfather, Amos, in a creaky wooden chair, the kind that groaned with every shift. Outside, the storm battered the house, rain hammering the tin roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. The air smelled of damp wood and the bitter coffee Amos always brewed too strong. Caleb's boots were still muddy from the walk up the long dirt drive, and he hadn't bothered to take them off. Grandpa didn't seem to care tonight. Amos was 82, wiry and tough as old leather, with hands that bore the scars of a lifetime working the land. His eyes, sharp despite his age, fixed on Caleb like he was measuring him. "You're old enough now," Amos said, setting his mug on the table with a soft clunk, "old enough to hear what this place really is." Caleb shifted, uneasy. He'd spent every summer at Marrowfield since he was a kid, helping with chores, driving the tractor, feeding the pigs. It was just a farm, cornfields, a sagging barn, a few cows, and a creek that ran dry half the year. But the way Amos spoke, low and deliberate, made the familiar feel foreign. "You ever wonder why this place is still green when others go dry?" Amos asked. "Why our crops don't fail even in bad years?" Caleb shrugged. "Good soil, I guess. You always said you knew the land better than most." Amos's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "That's part of it, but there's more. This farm's got a history, boy. A shadow that don't lift, and it's time you knew it." Caleb leaned forward, the fire warming his face. "What kind of history?" Amos took a slow sip of coffee, eyes never leaving the flames. "The kind that don't get written down, the kind that lives in the dirt, in the trees, in the way the wind moves at night. Marrowfield ain't just a farm, it's a bargain, and every bargain's got a price." He leaned back, the chair creaking under him, and began. Story 1. The Hollow's Call. Back in 1962, this town was called Dunmere. Small place, barely a dot on the map. A general store, the barber shop, a church with a steeple that leaned a little too far left. Folks here worked hard, farmers mostly, like us. But Dunmere had a secret, one it kept buried deep. It started with the disappearances. The first was a man named Tommy Vance. Young fella, maybe 25, worked as a hand on the old Pritchard farm. One morning in August, he didn't show up for work. Folks figured he'd skipped town. Tommy wasn't the settling kind. But a week later, they found his boots at the edge of our cornfield, right where the land dips into that low spot we call the hollow. Just the boots, sitting neat as you please, laces still tied. No sign of Tommy. People talked, of course, said he'd run off, maybe owed money. But then came the second one. Ellie Harper, a school teacher. She was last seen walking home from the church social, cutting through the path that runs by our property. They found her shawl in the hollow, folded and placed on a stump, like someone had left it as a gift. No blood, no tracks, nothing. By the time the third went missing, a boy named Jimmy Klein, barely 12, the town was spooked. Jimmy's bike was found in the hollow, propped against a tree, chains still spinning when they got there. That's when folks stopped calling it coincidence. Dunmere turned quiet after that. Doors got locked. Kids weren't allowed out past dusk. The sheriff, a man named Hollis, put up posters and organized searches, but they never found a thing. Just those objects, boots, a shawl, a bike, left like markers at the hollow. Now, the hollow ain't much to look at. Just a dip in the land, maybe 50 yards wide, where the corn grows thin and the soil's always damp, even in drought. Trees circle it, gnarled and bent, like they're leaning in to listen. I was 24 then, still living here with my pa. I'd walked that land 1,000 times, but after Jimmy went missing, I started noticing things. The way the air felt heavier in the hollow, like it was pressing down. The way the crickets went silent when you got close. And sometimes at night, I'd hear it, a low hum, like a voice too deep to make out, coming from the ground. One night, I couldn't sleep. The hum was louder, pulling at me. I grabbed my lantern and headed out. Foolish maybe, but I was young and stubborn. When I got to the hollow, the air was thick, almost wet. The lantern flickered, though there wasn't a breeze. And then I saw it. In the center of the hollow was a hole. Not big, maybe 3 feet across, square as a coffin, and lined with stones so smooth they looked polished. I'd never seen it before, and I knew every inch of this farm. I stepped closer, and the hum got louder, vibrating in my chest. I held the lantern over the hole, and the light caught something inside, a shape, dark and still, like a bundle of cloth. But it moved, just a little, like it was breathing. I backed away, heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went back with Pa. The hole was gone. No stones, no dirt piled up, just flat ground, like it had never been there. Pa looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I knew what I'd seen. A week later, they found another marker in the hollow, a woman's glove belonging to Clara Tate, who'd gone missing the night I saw the hole. That's when I started digging into the farm's history. I found an old ledger in the attic, written by my great-grandfather Elias Marrow. He'd bought this land in 1880 cheap from a man who wouldn't meet his eyes. The ledger wasn't just about crops and weather. Toward the end, Elias wrote about the agreement. Said the land was special, that it gave more than it took, but only if you honored it. He didn't say how, but he mentioned the hollow, called it the mouth of the land. He wrote that it needed to be fed, and that it chose what it wanted. I didn't want to believe it. Sounded like the ravings of a man gone soft in the head. But the disappearances kept happening, and the markers kept showing up, always in the hollow, always something personal. A hat, a scarf, a child's toy. By winter, 6 people were gone. That's when I met Amos Carver, not your uncle, but a different Amos, a drifter who passed through Dunmere. He was old even then, with a face like cracked clay and eyes that saw too much. He came to the farm one evening asking for work. I gave him a meal instead, and we got to talking. I told him about the hollow, the hole, the hum. He didn't laugh. He just nodded, like he'd heard it all before. "Your land's got a spirit," he said. "Not a ghost, not a demon, something older. It's tied to the hollow, and it's hungry. Always has been. You don't feed it, it takes what it wants." I asked him what to do. He told me about a ritual, something his people down in the Carolinas used to do. It wasn't about killing the thing. You can't kill what's part of the land. It was about binding it, keeping it asleep. He said it would take work, and it would cost me something personal. I didn't have a choice. The disappearances were tearing Dunmere apart, so I followed his instructions. First, I had to mark the hollow's edge with iron. I spent days hammering old nails and horseshoes into the ground, forming a circle around it. Carver said iron was like poison to spirits. It burned them, kept them contained. Next, I burned cedar branches, letting the smoke fill the hollow. The smell was sharp, clinging to my clothes for weeks. The hardest part was the offering. Carver said the spirit needed something alive, something that tied me to the land. Not a life, not exactly, but a piece of me. On the last night of the ritual, I went to the hollow alone. The hum was gone, but the air felt wrong, like it was waiting. I took a knife and cut my hand, letting the blood drip onto the ground at the center of the hollow. I mixed it with the soil, whispering words Carver taught me. Not a prayer, but a promise to respect the land, to keep the balance. When I finished, the ground shook. Not hard, just a tremor, like a sigh. The air lightened, and the crickets started singing again. I knew it had worked. The disappearances stopped after that. Dunmere breathed easier. Folks said it was just a bad season, that the killer had moved on. But I knew better. The hollow was quiet, but it wasn't gone. I've walked that circle every year since, checking the iron, burning cedar, offering a few drops of blood to keep the bargain. And it's held. For 60 years, it's held. Amos paused, his eyes on the fire. Caleb's mouth was dry, his hands clenched in his lap. The room felt smaller, the shadows sharper. "You're saying there's something in the hollow?" Caleb asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Something that takes people?" Amos nodded. "It's sleeping, but it's there. And it's my job to make sure it stays that way." Caleb shook his head, trying to laugh but failing. "Grandpa, that's crazy. You did a blood ritual to trap some kind of land monster?" "I know how it sounds," Amos said, "but you felt it, hasn't you? The way the hollow feels different, the way the air changes." Caleb didn't answer right away. He thought of the times he'd wandered near the hollow as a kid, how his skin would prickle, how the world seemed to go quiet. He'd always chalked it up to imagination, but now, "Why tell me this now?" he asked. Amos's face hardened. "Because I'm old, Caleb. I won't be here forever. And someone's gotta keep the circle. Someone's gotta know what this land really is." Caleb swallowed hard. "You think it's gotta be me? I hope it don't come to that. But you're a Marrow. This land's in your blood, same as mine. And it knows it." The fire cracked and Caleb jumped. Outside, the storm growled, low and restless. Amos leaned forward, his voice softer now. "That's not the only story, boy. There's more you need to hear." Story 2, The Faces in the Field. This one starts in 1985. I was in my 40s, still strong, still tending the farm alone after your great-grandma passed. Dunmere was smaller by then. Folks had left during the farm crisis, and the town felt like it was shrinking into itself. But Marrowfield was thriving. The corn grew tall, the soil stayed rich, and we never went hungry. People called it luck. I knew it was the bargain. That summer, something new started. It was July. Hot enough to make the air shimmer. I was checking the irrigation lines when I saw them. Faces in the corn. Not real faces, not exactly, but shapes in the stalks, like the wind had bent them into eyes and mouths. They weren't there when you looked straight on, but out of the corner of your eye, they watched you. I told myself it was the heat, that I was seeing things, but it kept happening. Every time I walked the fields, I'd catch those faces, dozens of them, shifting in the rows. And they weren't just random. They looked like people I knew. Tommy Vance, Ellie Harper, Jimmy Klein. the ones who'd vanished in '62. I tried to ignore it, but it got worse. At night, I'd hear whispers from the fields, soft and overlapping, like a crowd murmuring just out of earshot. I'd shine a flashlight, but there was nothing, just corn swaying in the dark. Then the dreams started. I'd see the hollow, the hole from '62, but it was bigger, deeper, and the faces were inside, staring up at me, their mouths moving like they were trying to speak. One morning, I found something in the field, a scarecrow, but not one I'd built. It was crude, made of old sacks and sticks, with a face painted in mud, 2 smeared circles for eyes, a jagged line for a mouth. It stood in the middle of the corn, right above where the hole had been. I tore it down, boned it in the barrel behind the barn. But the next day, another one was there. Same spot, same face. I called Amos Carver. He was living in Tennessee by then, but he came when I wrote him. He walked the fields with me, saw the faces in the corn, and didn't flinch. "The spirit's restless," he said. "You bound it, but it's strong. It's pushing back, using the ones it took to get your attention." I asked why. He said the bargain was weakening. The iron circle was old, rusting in places. The cedar smoke wasn't enough anymore, and my blood offerings, they were too small, too routine. The spirit wanted more, something bigger to keep it satisfied. Carver helped me reinforce the circle. We replaced the old iron with new stakes, drove them deep into the ground. We burned a mix of cedar and sage, walking the hollow's edge until the smoke was so thick it stung our eyes. But the offering was the hard part. Carver said it needed something living, something that carried my will. Not a person, thank God, but something close to me. I chose my old dog, Rusty. He was a mutt, loyal as they come, but he was sick, barely able to walk. I loved that dog like family. On a moonless night, I carried him to the hollow. I didn't kill him. Carver said it wasn't about death, but about giving up something that mattered. I laid Rusty in the center of the circle, cut my hand again, and let our blood mix in the soil. I whispered the words, promising to honor the land, to keep the balance. Rusty whimpered, then went still. When I looked again, he was gone. Not dead, gone. The ground was bare, like he'd never been there. The faces stopped after that. The whispers went quiet. The scarecrows didn't come back, but I felt it. The spirit was still there, watching, waiting for me to slip up. Caleb's hands were shaking now, his coffee untouched. "You gave up Rusty? To what? Something in the ground?" Amos's eyes were heavy. I didn't want to, but it was him or something worse. The land doesn't care about fair. It just wants what it's owed. Caleb stood, pacing to the window. The storm was louder now. The rain a steady roar. "This is insane, Grandpa. You're telling me our farm eats dogs, people, and we just let it?" "Sit down, Caleb," Amos said, voice firm. "You don't have to like it, but you gotta understand it. There's one more story, and it's the one that'll make you see." Caleb hesitated, then sank back into the chair. "Fine. What's the last one?" Amos leaned forward, the firelight carving deep lines in his face. "It's about your mother, and the night she faced the hollow herself." Story 3. The Girl Who Sang. This was 1998. Your mother, Sarah, was 17, same as you are now. She was a firecracker, stubborn, smart, always singing to herself when she worked the fields. She grew up on this farm, same as you, but I never told her about the hollow. I wanted to keep her safe, keep her away from the truth. But the land has a way of finding who it wants. That spring, the corn started growing wrong. The stalks were too tall, too fast, some bending in spirals like they were reaching for something. The soil in the hollow was wetter than usual, almost black, and it smelled like rust. I checked the iron circle, burned the cedar, did everything right. But I could feel it. The spirit was stirring again. Sarah noticed it too. She'd come back from the fields with a funny look, saying the corn felt alive in a way it shouldn't. I brushed it off, told her it was just a good season. But one night, she didn't come home. It was after supper. I'd sent her to check the fence line near the hollow. She was gone too long, and when I went looking, I found her flashlight on the ground, still on, rolling in the dirt. My heart stopped. I ran to the hollow, calling her name, but she wasn't there. The circle was intact, the iron stakes untouched, but the ground in the center was soft, like it had been dug up and packed down again. I searched all night till dawn broke. No sign of her. I was ready to call the sheriff, but then I heard it, singing, soft, clear, coming from the hollow. It was Sarah's voice, a song she used to hum, that's slower, like it was underwater. I ran back to the hollow, and there she was, sitting in the center, cross-legged, her hands in the dirt. Her eyes were open, but they weren't right, cloudy, like fog had settled in them. She was singing, and the corn around her was moving, swaying in time with her voice. There wasn't a breath of wind. I called her name, but she didn't hear me. I stepped into the circle, and the air turned cold, heavy, like I was pushing through water. The hum was back, louder than ever, and I saw it. The hole, same as in 62, square and stone-lined, right behind her. Something was in it, a shape that wasn't cloth this time, but flesh, pulsing like a heart. I grabbed Sarah, pulled her out of the circle. She fought me, stronger than she should have been, her nails digging into my arms. But I held on, dragging her back to the house. She stopped singing, and her eyes cleared, but she was shaking, crying, saying she'd seen something in the dirt, something that wanted her to stay. I locked the doors, burned sage until the house was thick with smoke. Sarah wouldn't talk for days. When she finally did, she told me what happened. She'd been checking the fence when she heard the hum, same as I had. It pulled her to the hollow, and when she got there, the ground opened. She saw the hole, saw the thing inside, a mass of roots and bone, with eyes that weren't eyes, staring at her. It spoke, not in words, but in feelings. It wanted her to sing, to keep singing, to feed it with her voice. She said it showed her things, faces in the dirt, people who'd been taken, their lives woven into the roots. She saw Tommy, Ellie, Jimmy, and others, their souls trapped, feeding the land's hunger. It wanted her to join them, to become part of the bargain, but she fought it, kept singing her own song, not the one it wanted. That's what saved her. I didn't know what to do. The spirit was stronger than ever, breaking through the circle I'd spent decades maintaining. I called Carver one last time. He was frail by then, but he came. He walked the hollow with me, saw the hole, felt the hum. "It's not just hungry anymore," he said. "It's angry. You've held it back too long, and it wants out." We performed the ritual again, but this time, it was different. Sarah insisted on helping. She said she'd seen the thing, knew what it wanted, and wouldn't let it take her family. We reinforced the iron circle, burned cedar and sage, and offered blood, mine and Sarah's, mixed together. But Sarah added something else. She sang, right there in the hollow, the same song she'd used to fight it. Her voice was clear, strong, and the corn stopped swaying. The hum faded, the hole closed. When it was over, Sarah collapsed. She was fine, just exhausted, but I knew she'd carried something heavy. The spirit was bound again, tighter this time. But Carver warned me it wouldn't last forever. "The land's awake now," he said. "It'll test you again, and it'll test her." Sarah left the farm a year later, went to college, built a life away from Marrowfield. She never talked about that night, but I saw it in her eyes. She carried it with her. And when you were born, Caleb, she made me promise to keep you away from the hollow. But you're here now, and the land knows it. Amos stopped, his voice hoarse. The fire was low, barely embers. Caleb sat frozen, his breath shallow. The storm outside had quieted, leaving a heavy silence. "My mom thought that thing?" Caleb asked, voice breaking. "And you never told her what it was?" Amos shook his head. "I wanted to protect her, but the land doesn't care about what we want. It chose her, same as it chose me. And now, it's choosing you." Caleb stood, pacing again, his boots scuffing the floor. "This is too much, Grandpa. You're saying I'm supposed to, what? Fight some monster in the dirt? Keep bleeding for it?" "I'm saying you need to be ready," Amos said. "The circle's old. I'm old, and the spirit's not asleep anymore. I felt it last week when you arrived. The hum's back, soft but there." Caleb stopped, staring at him. "You're serious?" Amos nodded. "Tomorrow, I'll show you the circle, teach you the ritual. You don't have to decide now, but you need to know how to protect this place. And yourself." Caleb looked out the window toward the dark fields. He thought of the hollow, the damp soil, the bent trees. He thought of his mother singing to save herself. And he felt it, a prickle on his skin, like the land was watching. "All right," he said finally. "Show me." Amos smiled, just a little. "Good. Get some sleep, boy. We start at dawn." The fire died to ash, and the house settled into quiet. Outside, the corn swayed gently, though the wind had stopped. And in the hollow, something stirred, listening to the heartbeat of the boy who carried the Marrow name.